As the wind continues to blow, so too shall I continue to fight.
Hello folks, it's been a while since I made a character guide, and this one on Jean will show how unique she is to play. She is a jack of all trades and a master of some. Her flexibility allows her to be played as any role and does a great job at all of them. She is perfect for filling in any position you are missing. Since she can fit in so many roles, this video will be a little longer to go through each one. The layout for this video is similar to my other ones, just a little more in depth. I'll cover the basic uses of her abilities first, then talk about some tricks and techniques with her kit. After that, I'll go over her talents and gear as a carry, DPS support, and healer. Finally, I'll go over the basics of building a strong team. Her normal attack is another 5-hit string like any other sword user. There is a large delay between the 3rd and 4th attack, so here's a good spot for animation cancel. Here, I'm comparing her 5-string combo against 2 other combos. One is cancelling the 3rd hit with a dash, and the other is cancelling the 3rd hit with a charge attack. The charge attack version does more damage, but that combo can't be used on every enemy since it launches. For smaller enemies, use the 3-hit into a dash cancel. This is also the combo for the quickest number of hits to proc her healing passive. The 3-hit into charge attack does the most damage, but it cannot be used on all enemies. Her charge attack is a unique launcher that does a lot of damage. It doesn't just send enemies up, but makes them float and fall slowly. This also makes it difficult to melee launched enemies and continue your combo, similar to Venti's burst causing enemies to float too high. Using her charge attack twice on larger enemies will also cause them to float in the air for a little while. In the section after her basic abilities, I'll show how to take advantage of this feature. Jean's elemental skill, Gale Blade, does a lot of anemone damage and sends enemies away. You can hold it for up to 5 seconds to gather smaller enemies and shoot them towards a specific location. It has a short cooldown of 6 seconds after she does the poke. The most common way to use this hold is to thrust enemies into water. You can also throw them off cliffs, but that requires you to chase after their bodies to get the loot. This is also a good tool to stagger larger enemies and interrupt their attacks. It can stagger the larger Fatuis and even lava churros after their shields are destroyed. Another use for her elemental skill is to test if cats always land on their feet. But don't try this at home. Jean's elemental burst, Dandelion Breeze, instantly heals your party and provides a continuous heal like Bennett's ult, but it also heals characters not on the field. It also does a large amount of initial damage and additional damage for enemies crossing the border of the circle. When the ult disappears, it does 1 instance of that damage to enemies still inside the AoE. This ability costs a whopping 80 energy and has a long 20-second cooldown. Normally, enemies only get hit by the anemone effect twice, once when the ult is used and another time when the ult disappears. I'll show you a trick later to make more anemone damage occur. Being inside the burst also cleanses your characters of all debuffs, which is helpful in all the domains that drop a material upgrade, as well as floor 12 in the Spiral Abyss. Now that we went over the basics, let's get into the good stuff. I'll start with the most common technique to deal extra fall damage. After launching smaller enemies in the air with her charge attack, look towards the ground under the enemy and hold her E. This will suck the enemy towards the ground, causing them to take a large amount of fall damage. After that, aim back up and launch them in the air for another chunk of fall damage. In this game, fall damage is true damage. It ignores defense and resistance. It does a percentage of their max health based on the velocity and height of the fall. At later parts of the game, this fall damage will do huge numbers due to the enemy's increased health pool. Her charge attack can still launch larger enemies, but you need to use it twice in order to float them. While the larger enemies are floating, you can kind of push them a little with holding her E, but it's not really that far. While they're floating, you can use that time to recover stamina and attack with a ranged unit. With proper timing, you can lock an enemy in this loop for a while. Here I'm just showing a sped up clip of me chain launching a lava churro while sneaking in a couple attacks. It's kinda therapeutic to watch. So far, we've seen tricks with her charge attack and Gale Blade, but we cannot leave out her ultimate. So here's my last technique that utilizes her ult. After using her burst, go near the AoE border and hold E to gather smaller enemies. Then just pan left and right to cause enemies to go in and out of her AoE. This will activate the boundary damage every time they cross it. Enemies will take enamel damage as you weave them back and forth. Here is the quick damage comparison on the same Hilichurl with and without weaving the ult. I know the first clip had a cryo reaction, but the Hilichurl still took twice as much damage. To get the most out of this, you want the enemies to be affected by another element so they get hit with the swirl reaction as well. It's best to have another character's ability activated to keep hitting enemies while Jean is charging her E, like Vicious Oz, Diona's Burst, or Xinyan's Pyrotix on her max shield. Check out the difference in damage by having an extra element to swirl with. Here is a comparison with the exact same enemies. The only difference is I'm weaving enemies across her ult. Each successful weave causes enamel damage, which causes swirl reactions to occur. This time I did a lot more damage and I also killed one of the enemies. Now for talents. The leveling priority for her carry build is Favonia's Bladework, Gale Blade, then Dandelion Breeze. As a healer, you want to level her burst, then skill. Don't bother with her normal attacks. As a DPS support, it depends on your team comp. If your team can apply lots of elemental status, then focus more on her burst and level that first. Otherwise, level her Gale Blade. Ideally, you want both at least level 6 since they are used quite often. Her first Ascension passive helps keep the team healthy if she is your carry. Each normal attack has a chance to heal the party, and the healing scales off her attack. And her second passive helps reduce the cost of the expensive 80 energy elemental burst. So Constellations for a 5-star character is definitely not free to play friendly, so I'll just quickly breeze over it. Constellation 1 increases her E damage and makes it easier to weave enemies in her ult. C2 helps buff the entire team and is easily activated in all her roles. C4 buffs her ult but needs double enamel to fully take advantage of it. And C6 makes her team tankier in her burst. Her constellations are nowhere as game-breaking as Child. Now for the fun part, her gear. I'll separate the recommended gear for her roles as a carry, DPS support, and healer. I'll be starting with the free-to-play weapons. For a carry build, you want to focus on her physical damage and use Prototype Rancor. The next best free-to-play weapon is the 3-star Harbinger of Dawn. The new Festering Desire does have 100 more attack than the 3-star sword, but the amount of crit rate and crit damage you lose is not worth it. The craftable Iron Sting isn't that good either due to the Elemental Mastery substat and the passive since Jean cannot constantly do elemental damage. For a DPS support, the Festering Desire is your best choice, followed by the Iron Sting. Festering Desire makes her 6-second Gale Blade a lot stronger, while the Iron Sting makes her burst stronger as you weave enemies. However, the burst weave is situational since it only works on smaller enemies and there's a long cooldown. The next best weapon is the 3-star Fillet Blade. For a healer, Festering Desire is once again the best option due to its energy recharge, followed by the Skyrider Sword. The energy recharge is super helpful since her burst is so expensive. For the gacha weapons, all the 5 stars reign supreme. As a carry, Aquila Favonia is the best choice. It increases both attack and physical damage. After that, the new Summit Shaper is also really strong. Use that even if you don't have someone in the team to generate shields. For 4-star options, the Black Sword from the Battle Pass is the top choice. It increases her damage, have one of the important crit stats, and synergizes with her passive to keep Jean healthy. Behind by a decent margin is the Prototype Rancor and the Flute. The Flute's passive isn't too powerful since the AoE is quite small. The choices for a DPS support swaps the order of 5 stars. Skyward Blade becomes really beneficial and has enough energy recharge to allow her artifacts to focus on attack percentage. The raw stats from the Summit Shaper still puts it above Aquila Favonia. For 4-star weapons, the Festering Desire is the best choice for the same reason. It allows you to focus on attack percentage for your artifacts, in addition to greatly increasing your Gale Blade damage. The Favonia Sword is up here too, but lacks the passive to increase damage. The Flute and Iron Sting will fall below. The Flute is better for Gale Blade's damage, while Iron Sting increases the weaving damage from her ult. If you don't want to weave smaller enemies in her ult, then pass on the Iron Sting entirely. Her best healer weapons are actually the same as her DPS support. Since her heal scales off attack, all the weapon choices will be ranked in the same order, except for Iron Sting. Use the 3-star Skyrider sword over the Iron Sting. Her artifacts as a carry is quite flexible. Her normal and charge attacks will be the majority of her damage output, with the occasional Gale Blade and fall damage technique. Due to her variety of damage, it's better to use 2 sets of 2-piece bonus that suits your playstyle. Combine Bloodstain with either Gladiator or Venerer. The set you pick depends on how often you use her Gale Blade. If it's on cooldown, then pick Venerer. If you prefer to save it up to do the fall damage combo, then go with Gladiator. The sets also depend on what stats you were able to find and how to best fit her stat priority. If you don't have these 5-star artifacts, then you can temporarily substitute them with Martial Artist, Gambler, or the other plus 18 attack sets. You should upgrade to the 5 stars eventually since they have a higher stat cap. The stats you want to prioritize this time is crit rate to at least 50%, then crit damage. Try to keep a 1-to-2 ratio. After that, it's physical damage on the goblet and attack percent on the timepiece. The attack stat increases her overall heals in addition to damage. The artifacts for Jean's DPS role will focus on her elemental skill and burst. For teams focusing on a specific element, then 4-piece Venerer is the best to increase the burst damage along with your team's focus element. The earlier video with the weaving technique on her burst uses 4-piece Venerer to show the difference in damage. If you want more general damage for Jean and not rely on team reactions, then go with 2-piece Venerer and 2-piece Noblesse or Gambler. The one you pick depends if you want more damage from her Gale Blade or her Dandelion Breeze. You can also run with 4-piece Noblesse to buff the entire team after she ults. I think the 4-piece is average since her burst usually takes a while to charge up if you are focusing more on the attack stat. Oh, for her stats, you want to have Anemo damage on the goblet and attack percent on the other 2 artifacts if you have an energy recharge weapon. Play around to get at least 1 piece of gear with energy recharge. Elemental Mastery is a good stat only if you are running 4-piece Venerer, otherwise attack percentage will provide more benefits. There is also a specialized set that focuses on hitting enemies really hard with her Gale Blade. For this set, you want the Festering Desire weapon, 2-piece Venerer, and 2-piece Gambler. Then you want to focus Anemo damage on the goblet, crit rate and crit damage on the helmet, and attack percent on the timepiece. With this build, swap Jean in every 6 seconds to poke with her E. As a healer, Jean can use the same set shown in her DPS support build and still provide a good amount of healing since it scales off her attack. If you want to focus more on healing numbers, then use 4-piece Maidens. However, I would rather use 2-piece Maiden and 2-piece Gladiator if I'm focusing on heals. As for stats, there are 2 routes to choose. One is to have a very strong heal, but not that often. This is good for emergency heals when things are going south. The other route is to have weaker heals, but a lot more often. Quick heals will focus on energy recharge and less on attack percent. Both builds are fine as a focus healer, but the first one will provide a little extra damage for the team. For team comps with Jean, I'll be going with a different approach. Instead of listing characters to place on Jean's team, I'll go over the basics of building a team so you can fit Jean into the role you are lacking. A strong team will have a primary carry. This is the character that will stay on the field the longest and able to maintain good DPS while they're on screen. They should be able to hit hard with their normal and charge attacks since their skills and abilities will have cooldown and downtime. Their abilities should complement their DPS, not be the primary source. Another important role on your team is to have a support character to keep your team healthy. This can be a healer or a shielder to prevent damage. This role won't focus too much on dealing damage and more on supporting and buffing the team. The other 2 team slots are for DPS support. They should be swap supports, which are characters that can be swapped in, use 1 or 2 of their abilities, then swap out to the next character. They will spend minimal time on the field to allow your carry to return faster. Strong characters in this role should have abilities that remain in effect even if they are not on the field. In addition to these 4 roles, think about elemental reactions. Your support should have abilities that can react with either another support or your main carry to create reactions for extra damage. There's a lot more detail I can go over, but this video is already running long. These key points are good enough to build a strong team. Find the characters you already have that can fit these roles well, then add Jean to the role you are missing. Again, she is quite flexible and can be a great boon in any role. Thanks for staying to the end. Like and subscribe if you feel up for it. Leave a comment or question below and I'll try to respond to them. And as always, have fun out there, traveler.